Big news about Hus agreements.
Hi, I'm Blake Lively, and I'm going to be taking the BuzzFeed quiz, Which Iconic Blake Lively Character?
Hi besties. I need you to sit down for this one because what I'm about to walk you through is not just messy, it's not just dramatic, it's not just Hollywood chaos. This is the kind of story that makes you look at your own phone sitting next to you and suddenly feel uneasy. This is the kind of story that makes you rethink what company property really means and whether privacy is even real anymore. So imagine this, you work for a company. You're loyal. You're grinding. You're answering emails at midnight. You're texting clients on weekends. You're using the phone they gave you because that's what you're supposed to do. And from day one, there were no rules about personal use. No handbook. No written policy. No warning that, hey, by the way, anything you do on this phone belongs to us. None of that. In fact, it was the opposite. They encouraged you to use it for personal stuff. They said, go ahead, it's easier that way. When you wanted to keep your original phone number, the number your family had, your friends had, your doctors had, they helped you port it over. They put it onto their network. They paid the monthly bill. Everything looked normal. Everything felt fine. So years go by, that phone becomes your life. Your conversations with your mom. Your group chats. Your private jokes. Your personal struggles. Your doctor appointments. Your password saved in your keychain. Your therapy emails. Your banking alerts. Your location history. Everything. Now fast forward, you resigned. You've decided to move on. You're leaving the job. It might not be on perfect terms, maybe there's tension, maybe there isn't, but you've given notice. You're walking out the door and the day before you officially leave, you're suddenly called into the office. It's tense, the vibe is off. Instead of a polite goodbye, there's what feels like a hostile takeover. They take your phone. They take your laptop. Not casually. Not temporarily. They take them like you're a suspect and you're told, don't worry, this is just to protect the company. Standard procedure. We just want to make sure you didn't steal anything. We just want to make sure you didn't do us dirty. You feel uneasy, but you think, okay, fine. I didn't do anything wrong. I'll cooperate. Then comes the part that should make everyone pause. The chief of staff tells you that if you want to transfer your phone number to a new device, you'll need to go to Verizon. That's fair. That makes sense. But to do the transfer, they need your passcode. You hesitate, but you're told it's just for the transfer. Limited use. Only for that purpose. So you agree. You go to Verizon. You wait for hours, sitting there expecting your number to be transferred over to a new phone so you can move on with your life, and the transfer never happens. Or not that day. Not the next day. Not ever. Instead, 5 months later, data from your phone ends up in the New York Times. Let that sink in. 5 months after you walk out of a job, private messages from your device are being used publicly. That's what happened to Jenel, and when you first hear that summary, you think, okay, maybe they just checked company files. Maybe they pulled business emails. Maybe they reviewed work-related texts. No, that's not what happened. What happened, according to court filings and exhibits, was a full digital forensic extraction using a tool called Celebrite. Now, I'm not a forensic expert. I had to look this up. I had to read the extraction report. I had to dig into Exhibit 199 that was attached to a motion for summary judgment. And what it shows is something called a full file system extraction, 316 megabytes of raw data. Let's translate that. This wasn't someone opening the Messages app and scrolling. This wasn't someone backing up a few work emails. This was a deep-level scrape. A complete copy. The gut of the phone. 316 megabytes of data in message databases alone. Google estimates that could equal roughly 150,000 to 200,000 pages of text if printed, and yet, out of that mountain, only about 122 pages were ever produced publicly. Think about that ratio. Imagine someone tears your entire house apart, rips off the roof, pulls up the floorboards, opens every drawer, cracks every safe, and then walks out holding 3 sticky notes and says, "This is what we found." That's what this feels like. A full file system extraction doesn't just grab visible texts. It digs into system files regular users can't access. It retrieves deleted messages that still exist as fragments. It pulls data from apps that are supposed to block backups, like WhatsApp, Signal, Snapchat. It can gather location breadcrumbs, where you've been, when you were there, even if you weren't actively using maps.it. Accesses the keychain. That's the terrifying part. Your keychain stores saved passwords, email logins, medical portals, streaming accounts, bank credentials, digital keys to your life. Now, the defense has argued that they didn't hack anything, that they had the passcode, that they only accessed what was on the phone. But here's the issue: having a passcode lets you open the screen. It does not automatically grant you authorization to bypass layered encryption systems, extract raw databases, or create forensic mirror images of the device. Celebrite isn't a casual tool. It's used by law enforcement. It's used in criminal investigations. In some jurisdictions, it's restricted because of how invasive it is. This isn't someone peeking through a window, this is someone dismantling the entire structure. And here's where it gets legally explosive. California Penal Code 502, the Comprehensive Computer Data Access and Fraud Act, prohibits knowingly accessing a computer system without permission to take or copy data. It doesn't just apply to remote hacking. It applies to unauthorized use, even if you physically possess the device. The Stored Communications Act is narrower, it focuses more on server access. But Penal Code 502? That's broader. It covers copying data from a device itself. So the argument being made is this: even if they had temporary physical possession of the phone and the passcode, using forensic software to scrape 316 megabytes of private communications could qualify as unauthorized access. And if that's true, we're not talking about a civil dispute anymore. We're talking about potential criminal exposure. Now layer on top of that the California Invasion of Privacy Act. That law makes it illegal to intercept or record communications transmitted between phones without consent from all parties involved. Group chats, incoming synced messages, conversations between third parties who had no idea their messages were being extracted. Every single person in those threads had a reasonable expectation of privacy. Melissa Nathan, Katie Casey's, Brianna Costello, Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, Matthew Mitchell. Others, their communications were swept up too, not just Jenel's. And here's another detail that makes this worse: Jenel didn't even disconnect the phone from her iCloud immediately. She didn't change her password until January, after litigation began, after she spoke with someone at Apple, after she realized the magnitude of what might have happened. So the question becomes, was the phone still linked? Could additional extractions have been performed? Could real-time messages have been accessible? We don't know, but the possibility alone is chilling, because if someone retains access to a synced device, and that device auto-backs up messages, then theoretically they could see incoming communications as they happen. That's why the wiretapping angle was raised. That's why the Stored Communications Act was raised, and from what we've seen, those claims were dismissed. The judge took a narrow view, focused on technical definitions, but when you look at the forensic level of what was done, it feels bigger than a technicality. In criminal cases, real criminal cases, if law enforcement wants to copy someone's computer, they need a search warrant. They need probable cause. They need a judge to define the scope. They need guardrails. Joshua Duggar's case required a warrant to mirror his computer and reconstruct deleted files, but here, a private employer allegedly performed a full extraction on a departing employee's phone without a warrant, without judicial oversight, without defined limits. Judge, jury, executioner, and then, according to filings, the data was handed over to Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds in the middle of a separate dispute involving Justin Baldoni. Once that happened, everything on that phone was effectively in their possession. 316 megabytes, hundreds of thousands of messages, years of private life, and from that ocean, 122 pages were cherry-picked to paint narratives, to frame people as villains, to shape public perception. If this evidence ends up tossed because of how it was obtained, it's not a technical loophole. It's the legal system saying you cannot benefit from potentially unlawful conduct, because allowing a case to proceed on evidence that never should have existed in your hands in the first place doesn't protect justice. It rewards invasion, and what's wild to me is the silence around criminal enforcement. No public charges. No police announcements. No dramatic raids, just civil motions and procedural dismissals. Meanwhile, people's private communications have been blasted into headlines, people have quit jobs. Reputations have taken hits. Public shaming has unfolded in real time, and all of it traces back to a forensic extraction that most ordinary people don't even understand. When I first read 316 megabytes, I didn't grasp it either, but when you convert it to pages? When you pictured 200,000 sheets of paper stacked in a room, that's when it hits. That's not a quick review. That's a digital excavation. And the deeper I dug into this, the more I realized, this isn't just about one celebrity feud. This is about power. About access. About what happens when someone with resources decides to pull the roof off your digital house. And the scariest part, most of us carry our entire existence in our pocket. If this can happen here, what stops it elsewhere? Alright besties, that's where we're going deeper into the legal fallout, the judges' rulings, the countersuits, the public narrative battle, and what happens if this evidence is ultimately ruled inadmissible. Alright besties. Take a breath, because if part 1 was about understanding what happened technically, part 2 is about what it means legally, publicly, and reputationally, and why this situation is way bigger than just one messy Hollywood feud. So now we're at the stage where the extraction has happened. The 316 megabytes exist. The 122 cherry-picked pages have been circulated. Headlines have been written. Public opinion has started forming. And the legal machine is in motion. This is where everything gets complicated, because once evidence is out there, especially evidence that's emotional, private, messy, you can't just rewind the clock. Even if a court later says it was obtained improperly. Even if a judge rules it inadmissible. Even if a higher court overturns something, the damage is already done, and that's the part people forget. The legal question right now isn't just did they have the passcode. It's did they have authorization to do what they did with it. Those are two completely different things. Consent to unlock a phone for a number transfer is not the same thing as consent to perform a forensic mirror extraction of the entire device. It's not the same thing as consent to scrape deleted messages. It's not the same thing as consent to pull system-level databases that ordinary users can't even see, and courts care deeply about scope. Scope is everything. If you give someone permission to enter your living room, that doesn't mean they can break open your safe in the basement. If you hand someone your car keys so they can move your vehicle out of the driveway, that doesn't mean they can drive it across state lines and search the trunk. Scope matters, and from the filings we've seen, the argument being raised is that the scope here was widely exceeded. Now let's talk about the judge. There's been frustration. A lot of frustration. Because certain privacy-based claims didn't survive motions to dismiss. The Stored Communications Act claim? Gone. Wiretapping claim? Dismissed. Some invasion of privacy arguments. Narrowed or blocked, and to people watching from the outside, it feels like the system shrugged. But here's something important: dismissal at one stage doesn't always mean the underlying conduct was approved. Sometimes it means the legal theory didn't fit cleanly into the statute. Sometimes it means technical definitions matter more than moral outrage. Judges operate inside statutory boxes, but public reaction doesn't, and what's brewing here is a collision between technical statutory interpretation and a much broader question of fairness. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: even if no criminal charges are filed, even if no statute is ultimately deemed violated, it does not automatically mean what happened was ethical. Lawful and ethical are not identical twins, and now let's move to the countersuits. Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath filing counterclaims against Stephanie Jones wasn't random. It wasn't just deflection. It wasn't just "we're mad we got caught." It was strategic, because if you believe someone obtained and distributed private communications unlawfully, you don't just defend, you go on offense, and that's what this feels like. A legal chess match. Point one side saying, this evidence proves misconduct. The other side saying, you never should have had that evidence in the first place. And that second argument is powerful, because in American jurisprudence, there's a concept known as fruit of the poisonous tree. If evidence is obtained illegally, anything derived from it can be tainted. Now, that doctrine applies most cleanly in criminal law. This is civil. So it's not a perfect parallel. But the spirit of it lingers. You don't get rewarded for wrongdoing. If a case proceeds to trial using evidence that was potentially obtained through unlawful access, you create a dangerous precedent. You signal that aggressive digital intrusion is a viable litigation tactic. That's terrifying, because think about the ripple effect. Imagine every high-level corporate breakup turning into a forensic arms race. Imagine every disgruntled employer saying, well, we physically had the phone, so let's scrape it. Imagine private communications becoming bargaining chips in unrelated disputes. We'd be living in a world where leaving a job means forfeiting your digital soul, and let's not forget the third parties. Group chats are intimate spaces. People vent. They joke. They exaggerate. They speak in shorthand. They assume privacy. Melissa, Nathan, Katie, Brianna, Matthew, Mitchell, Justin, Jamie. Others whose names may not even be public, their words were pulled too. They didn't consent to extraction. They didn't authorize forensic copying. Yet their communications are part of a 316 megabyte archive sitting somewhere. Where is it stored? Who has access? Was it duplicated? How many copies exist? Those are questions that matter, because digital evidence isn't like paper evidence. It doesn't degrade. It doesn't yellow with age. It can be cloned infinitely. And here's another layer: reputational warfare. When 122 pages get released out of a 200,000 page equivalent universe, narrative control becomes everything. Selection shapes perception. If I hand you 122 pages from your worst moments, sarcastic jokes taken literally, frustration text stripped of context, incomplete threads missing follow-ups, I can make almost anyone look monstrous. Context lives in the pages that weren't shown, and that's the part the public rarely sees. We see excerpts. We see highlighted lines. We see curated screenshots. We don't see the 315.8 megabytes that didn't fit the narrative. That imbalance alone is powerful enough to sway headlines. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: fear. If you're watching this unfold from inside the industry, you're thinking quietly to yourself, could this happen to me? Could a company encourage personal use for years and then weaponize it at the moment of departure? Could my private group chats be mirrored and sifted through? Could deleted messages be resurrected? Because remember, Celebrite doesn't just read what's visible. It pulls ghost fragments. It rebuilds deleted threads. It extracts hidden metadata. That's not casual access. That's excavation, and excavation without judicial oversight is what makes people uneasy. In criminal cases, forensic duplication requires probable cause. A warrant. Define parameters. Oversight. Here, there were no guardrails. No neutral magistrate. No limitation on scope, and that's why some observers are calling this egregious. Now let's be clear: accusations are not convictions. Allegations are not findings of guilt. We have to hold that line. But we can still analyze the implications. If higher courts revisit this, if appeals are filed, if new motions challenge admissibility, if discovery reveals more about how the extraction was performed, this story could shift again, because right now, we're in a gray zone, and gray zones are where public trust erodes.